The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I'm in my 7th year working alongside Bob, originating our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. It's trade deadline week.
Yes, it is. And for this week's Grade the Script segment, we will be looking at the trades made around the league. The deadline was on Tuesday, and there wasn't anything too crazy, but we did see second overall pick Chase Young go to the 49ers. How does this impact their defensive line?
Well, the Browns are obviously stout up front, and the Steelers are going to be great with Cam Hayward back now, but I think this trade pushes the 49ers over the top, giving them the best pass rush in the NFL. I mean, you just look at it. You've got Chase Young, who has 38 pressures this year, 7th among edge defenders, opposite Nick Bosa, who's 3rd in pressures among edge defenders. And then you move inside, you've got Javon Hargrave, who ranks 11th in pass rushing efficiency. I mean, when Eric Armstead and Javon Kinlaw are your 4th and 5th best pass rushers along the front, that's absolutely ridiculous. And we'll see San Francisco get all-pro left tackle Trent Williams back after the bye, Debo back after the bye. I think with this trade, and when they get the guys back on offense, everyone's at full strength. I think this team is better than the Eagles, but I'm not willing to make them favorites in the NFC yet, mostly because the Eagles have that inside track to the top seed and home field advantage in the playoffs. So San Francisco would have to play an extra game in the playoffs and travel to Philly in a potential NFC title. So I think Eagles still have to be favorites to win the NFC, but I think the 49ers are now the better team.
Yeah, and we saw the Commanders continue to sell as they sent former first-rounder Montez Sweat to the Bears. Did you like this move from both sides?
Well, it was strange to me to see Sweat go for so much more than Young. I mean, Young goes for a 3rd rounder, Sweat goes for a 2nd rounder, but it's a high 2nd rounder. And high 2nd round picks are so valuable. I mean, we see 2 of the best rookies this season have been Steelers cornerback Joey Porter and Lions tight end Sam Laporta. Both of them got drafted at the top of the 2nd round. I mean, just going back, a few drafts, T. Higgins, Kyle Duggar, Deebo Samuel, Nick Chubb, all high 2nd round picks. And then you get the cost security with those guys as well. So super valuable. And I just don't know that Montez Sweat is worth it. He ranks just 27th in pass rushing efficiency this year. And I think it's just another sign that Bears GM Ryan Poles does not have an ability to effectively evaluate edge defenders. We talked about this offseason, how crazy it was for him to give that 1 year, $10.5 million contract to Yannick Ngakoue. And what do you know? Ngakoue ranks 52nd in pass rushing efficiency out of just 57 qualifying edge defenders.
Yeah, the Bears will always be the Bears, but we did see the Bills went out and got secondary help with the addition of Rasul Douglas. Was this a smart move?
I think they needed to bring someone in to replace Trey White. Backup cornerback Christian Beneford is allowing 8.6 yards per target, and they never got that draft capital to come through with that 1st round pick they spent on Kaiir Elam. So it's been, they're juggling that 2nd spot across from Dane Jackson. They can bring in here Rasul Douglas. He's solid. He's conceding just 6.5 yards per target this year, so almost 2 yards per target better than Beneford. I think that Douglas isn't as good as Trey White, but he's close, and this is going to help the Bills make that playoff run.
Yeah, and we saw the Lions added depth at receiver with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I feel like this trade made sense for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Peoples-Jones from the Michigan area, so he goes a little bit of a homecoming for him. And I don't know, I feel like this move kind of just signals that the Lions don't fully trust Jameson Williams yet. He's definitely capable of making some explosive plays. We've seen that, but on a down-to-down basis. I don't know that they want him out there on the field. And we talked about how receiving depth was the only thing that could hold back Detroit's offense. So them adding another receiver makes a lot of sense. Peoples-Jones ranked 16th among wide receivers in passes with 10-plus air yards in 2022, but kind of fell out of the Browns' wide receiver rotation this season. So I like this change of scenery for Peoples-Jones, and Detroit's offense just gets a little bit better, in my opinion, with the depth that they bring in.
Yeah, and the Jaguars bring in help at guard with Urza Cleveland. Is he going to be able to find a spot in the starting lineup?
I think it's healthy to bring in some competition because they see how bad it gets behind Walker Little. I mean, Tyler Shatley's PFF blocking grade is 5th worst on true pass blocking stats. Now, Walker Little started the season at left tackle. He's more of a tackle, and he started there when Cam Robinson was suspended But then he got injured. He came back last game, only played 4 pass blocking snaps. So I assumed that he would replace Shatley, bump inside to guard when he became fully healthy. But now they bring in Cleveland to add some competition there. Maybe Cleveland's got the inside track to the starting job at this point. Cleveland ranks 14th in pass blocking efficiency this season. So good depth for the Jaguars to bring in on the offensive line to make sure that Shatley is not playing for them for this stretch run.
Yeah, and it was great to see the Vikings go out and find their next franchise QB with Joshua Dobbs. Not actually, but I mean, this move surprised me a little bit here.
Well, I mean, yeah, they had to do something. I was hoping they bring in Jameis Winston. That would have been my favorite scenario. But alas, we're just forced to see Jameis on the bench every week when he's the most exciting quarterback in the NFL. But I mean, yeah, Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, out for the year, maybe played his last snap for the Vikings. So they bring in Dobbs. But it's actually going to be fifth-round rookie Jaren Hall making the start this Sunday. I think Dobbs will start the rest of the way. I don't think Hall can come anywhere close to matching Cousins, who's 6th in yards per pass play this year, and he only has a 2.5% turnover-worthy play rate, which is 7th lowest. So Dobbs, he's not going to be anywhere near the passer that Cousins was. He's 28th in yards per pass play this year with the Cardinals, but he is leading all quarterbacks with 11.9 yards per carry on scrambles. And Dobbs' mobility has also helped him move around the pocket with just a 16% pressure to sack ratio. That ranks 12th. So, I don't know, getting a mobile Dobbs in there to throw to, the breakout star, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson probably comes back. I mean, the NFC playoff picture for that 7 spot is so bad right now. It's either going to be, the Falcons, the Saints. I mean, well, actually, one of the Falcons or Saints has to win the division. So the second place in the NFC South is going to make it, or the Vikings make a run with Dobbs. I don't know. I would say the Vikings are underdogs to do that, but it certainly looks better than when it was just going to be Jaren Hall starting the rest of the way.
Yeah, and we saw another NFC trade. The Giants sent Leonard Williams to Seattle. I feel like this was a solid move for Seattle's defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, the pass rush on the interior is starting to look a little bit scary. I mean, Leonard Williams ranks 14th in pressures for defensive tackles, and he'll line up alongside Jaron Reed on that interior, who ranks 14th in pass rushing efficiency. So you got kind of 2 top 20 defensive tackles rushing the passer. Remember, they brought in Frank Clark as well to get a little bit of edge depth after Nwosu went out for the year. So I like what Seattle's defense is doing with the trade. Now, I don't know if it's going to work this week because Baltimore's interior offensive line is really solid. In fact, they've allowed the third lowest ratio of pressures up the middle this year. And Tyler Linderbaum has been a breakout second-year center. So maybe it doesn't hit right away, but overall, I like the trade for the Seahawks.
All right, well, the Raiders are making big changes as they dump their head coach and bench their starting QB. What does that mean for him this week?
Well, yeah, I think they're going to bring Aiden O'Connell off the bench after that kind of putrid performance that Jimmy Garoppolo had last Monday night. But it's worth mentioning that O'Connell is worse than Garoppolo. O'Connell's been averaging negative 0.11 EPA per play, and Garoppolo has averaged negative 0.05 EPA per play. That translates to about 2 points better per game than O'Connell. So the Raiders offense will drop off, but maybe it gets more exciting. Maybe O'Connell takes a few more shots downfield, but it's not looking good for the Raiders the rest of the day. It's looking like a full franchise reset.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment, and we've got the injury watch. And it looks like the Rams could be without Matt Stafford this week. If he's out, what's this offense going to look like?
Well, I don't like the matchup for the Rams offense, regardless if it's Stafford in there or Brett Rippon. So Stafford is averaging just 5.7 yards per pass play in games versus defenses with top 10 pressure rates this year. That offensive line in Los Angeles is just not strong enough to hold up against these elite pass rush units. And Stafford, when he's not facing an elite pass rush, is averaging 7.4 yards per pass play. So almost 2 yards per pass play better against just defenses that don't have a good pass rush. But that is not the case this week because Green Bay's defense ranks 7th in pressure rate. So whether it's Stafford, I think it's most likely Rippon, but if it is, whoever it is back there is going to be facing a ton of collapsing pockets, and that kind of makes Sean McVay's offense unfunctional. So I'm not optimistic about what the Rams are going to do this week. And another note on Rippon is he's definitely unlikely to match Stafford's 1.9% PFF turnover worthy play rate. That's second lowest in the league. So we'll probably see more picks for the Rams and collapsing pockets. Not looking good for this week's game in Green Bay.
All right, and the Patriots have had some bad injury luck, and now they lose Kendrick Bourne to an ACL. How big is this going to be?
Well, Bourne leads all Patriots wide receivers, averaging 1.22 yards per route run versus man coverage this year. And he was really Mac Jones' only hope this week, as Washington's defense runs the 8th highest man coverage rate, because Mac's been terrible against man all season. His yards per attempt against man is just 60% of his yards per attempt against zone. And the only guy he's been able to get it to is Bourne. Now Bourne tears his ACL. Washington could probably just man up these, mediocre to bad Patriots wide receivers. Mac maybe tries to sling it in there to his tight ends, but I don't know. I don't know that the Commanders' defense is all that bad of an outlook this week, even though they just sold both their top edge rushers, because they could just kind of man up these Patriots wide receivers with Bourne out.
Yeah, and it looks like the Bears could be without Tremaine Edmunds this week. How would this impact the game Sunday?
Yeah, Edmunds suffered that knee injury last Sunday night, and he might be out here. And that's going to be a big problem because Chicago's defense is already allowing a league high 55% pass success rate to running backs. And now they face Alvin Kamara, who has been peppered since he came off of suspension in week 4. I mean, the Saints targeted running backs on nearly 30% of passes in October. That's second most in the NFL. And Alvin Kamara will be there all day for Derek Carr in the screens. So the Bears are already awful defending running backs, catching passes out of the backfield. And now they lose their best cover linebacker in Tremaine Edmunds. It could be a big day in the receiving department for Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, and it looks like the Browns O-line could be banged up this week. What's going on with that situation?
Well, you remember that they lost all-pro right tackle Jack Conklin to a season-ending ACL tear in week 1. So they had backup DeJuan Jones, a huge dude, 6'8", 374 pounds, massive dude. He's been a little shaky in run blocking, which I guess makes sense. It's hard to get a big body like that moving out into space, but he's been good in pass blocking because he has such a big wingspan. He's a wall to get around. He's ranked 14th in pass blocking efficiency, which is really good for a backup tackle. But now Jones could be sidelined this week, and the pass protection would get pretty flimsy with third stringer James Hudson on the field.
Yeah, 6'8", 374 is just hard to imagine that is the same species as us. Like, that is a mammoth.
I'd love to stand next to him.
That's a mammoth of a man. But we're seeing both good and bad news on the Giants injury report this week. How are they going to do in Vegas?
So good news is Daniel Jones will suit up on Sunday for New York's offense, and they'll likely have both starting tackles on the field together for the first time since week 1. Now, that's not necessarily a great thing because right tackle Evan Neal ranks 6th in pass blocking efficiency, and he'll line up across from Max Crosby, who leads the NFL with 47 pressures. I mean, Crosby has been an absolute beast this year. If the Raiders were at all competitive, I think he would be in that Defensive Player of the Year running. And I think he might be the most valuable defensive player in the NFL this year in terms of wins above replacement. But they do get left tackle Andrew Thomas back on the field. He's good. I mean, he ranked 8th in pass blocking efficiency last year, and we've been waiting for Thomas to come back for so long. It feels like he had that setback with his hamstring the week he was likely to come back, and so he had to be out for a few more weeks. And Thomas coming back probably pushes Justin Pugh, who they signed off the street, and he's been playing left tackle for them, probably pushes him into guard. And Pugh was good as a guard these past few seasons. And that would bench Mark Lewinsky, who ranks 3rd worst in pass blocking efficiency. So I think the Giants' offensive line going forward, pretty solid-ish. I mean, at least as good as they were last year. But this week, Evan Neal across from Max Crosby is going to be a problem. And then the bad news for New York in terms of the injury report is that they are probably going to be without Darren Waller for a while, and he ranks 7th in success rate among tight ends. And this hamstring injuries just keep flaring up for him. I mean, you remember he missed 8 games with a hamstring injury last season. So now, I don't know, if he's out for another 8 games, it's tough for the Giants free agent signing this that they brought in this summer.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our public opinion talk with me. And as always, I have been getting the inside scoop of what the fans are saying, and they never fail to have the hot takes. Every time the public seems to get their mind set on something, it feels like the opposite outcome is next. But this week, the Cowboys fans are riding high after putting up 43 points. Where are you at with this offense right now?
Yeah, with Dak Prescott averaged 13.9 yards per pass play on throws with 10 plus air yards against the Rams. And he should be able to throw downfield again on Sunday. So Philadelphia's secondary has had a different starting five combination in every game this season. It's been a constant rotation for them, and their nickelbacks are allowing a 7.8% explosive pass rate. We talked about how that signing of Bradley Roby was going to help plug that hole for the Eagles, and he was good in his first game for them, but then he got hurt. So now they keep the carousel rotating in the secondary, and that's going to be a big problem this week if Roby is out, because CeeDee Lamb lines up on the inside, and Lamb is coming off a game with 12 receptions for 158 yards against the Rams. So that's huge for the Cowboys. They'll definitely be attacking downfield in the seams with CeeDee Lamb. Also for the Cowboys, a good matchup for them is their left guard. Tyler Smith leads the NFL in pass blocking efficiency, so he should be able to stifle Philadelphia rookie interior defender Jalen Carter, who's fifth in pressures among defensive tackles this year. So I like those couple of matchups for the Cowboys. The thing I don't like for the Cowboys, they're a little bit of a bully, meaning that they beat up on bad teams and they struggle against good teams. You look at the recent history. Dallas is 47, 22, and 2 against the spread against teams with a win percentage of 500 or less since Dak Prescott's rookie season, dating back to 2016. But they do tend to struggle when they step up in class. So that would be the bad sign for the Cowboys this week, even though it seems like, matchup wise, you kind of like what their offense can do in Philadelphia on Sunday in that big divisional matchup.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. And we've got stock up, stock down. Whose stock are you buying right now?
Stock up, Dolphins defense. I mean, you saw the Jalen Ramsey coming back last week at cornerback for the Dolphins, and he completely shut down his side of the field in his first game back. He wasn't working in at all. He played 100% of snaps on that side of the field, and Patriots quarterback Mac Jones averaged just 0.7 yards per pass play on throws to his left, and Ramsey baited Mac Jones into that interception. It looked like a duck, but Mac just thought that Ramsey was going to keep on the deep route there, and Ramsey basically baited Mac. So I think Ramsey is already working at full strength, and he's a point better by our metrics than backup cornerback Eli Apple, who is surrendering 1.57 yards per cover snap, ranking 60th out of 65 qualifying cornerbacks. And the good news is that Apple will get benched this game with Ramsey back, but also Pro Bowl cornerback Xavier Howard is back. So we'll have Howard and Ramsey at cornerback for the Dolphins, and they'll also have Javon Holland back from a concussion. That secondary is starting to look really scary.
Yeah, I was going to say that secondary is frightening, but they also have a good D-line. How have those guys played so far?
Yeah, so up front, it's just as scary. Interior defender Christian Wilkins, 13th in pass rushing efficiency. Bradley Chubb ranks 15th among edge rushers in pressures. And then Jalen Phillips is coming on. He ranks 18th in pass rushing efficiency the last 2 weeks. He's coming off that oblique injury earlier this year. And remember, Phillips ranked 9th in pass rushing efficiency last year. So if he can get up into the top 10, opposite Bradley Chubb, that's 2 top 20 edge rushers. Christian Wilkins is clearly a top 15 interior defender. So all of a sudden you've got one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. We just talked about how that secondary is one of the best in the NFL. The linebackers, certainly a weakness, but I mean, Vic Fangio has done more with less in terms of linebackers in the past. So the Dolphins defense is allowing just 5.1 yards per pass play. That's 11th. And that's with all the injuries they've had in the first half of the season. So I clearly think this is a top 10 defense in the second half of the year.
All right, well, let's look at who's got their stock trending down for you this week.
Yeah, to me, that's Chargers offense. And we talked a little bit about this last week in our primetime preview. But they did put up 30 points on the Bears, but from a down-to-down efficiency, it still wasn't that impressive. In fact, the Chargers have a league low 37% success rate since week 4 when starting center Corey Linsley and wide receiver Mike Williams went out. And they did average 5.4 yards per play against the Bears last week, but most of that came from Austin Eckler's 11.8 yards per target. And we talked earlier in this podcast about how bad the Bears are at defending, receiving running backs. So if those yards aren't going to be available for Eckler this week, and I don't think they will be because New York's defense is fourth in pass success rate to running backs, then I don't know where Herbert's going to look. I mean, he's only got Keenan Allen left out there, and he's going to be contained on the inside by Jets nickelback Michael Carter, who is allowing a league low 0.42 yards per cover snap in the slot. Eckler's probably not going to get anything going on the ground against the Jets' sixth rated rush defense. So this could be another really solid performance for the Jets defense against one of the NFL's top quarterbacks, as we've already seen them stifle Mahomes, Hurts, Allen this season.
Yeah, after seeing how well this Jets defense has played, I really wish we could have seen Rodgers get this season in, but hopefully next year he comes back healthy.
Yeah, or maybe later this year. I mean, he's been throwing. If the Jets can stay in it, and I can't believe they're in it, some of these wins have been absolutely crazy. I mean, the Giants missing that 35-yard field goal last week, that's insane. But if they can stay in it, I mean, people are kind of optimistic that Rodgers could maybe come back in week 17, week 18, which would be crazy. That'd be, kind of the earliest we've ever seen anyone come back from an Achilles. And, they just got to sneak into that 7th seed. But unlike the NFC, which we talked about earlier, that 7th seed in the AFC has plenty of competition this year. So I don't know if the Jets are going to be able to pull it off.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the weather of the week. What are you seeing out there?
Well, the highest wind speeds this week are expected to be in the Germany game. But you look at it, Grant will pull up a picture of the stadium right now, and you look at it, and those soccer stadiums are kind of unique. They're designed to keep the fans dry because they cover all of the seats so that if it's raining, the fans don't have to sit in the rain. But because of that, it kind of blocks the wind out too, with the roof coming out over most of the stadium. So I'm not really sure how to handle that. We don't see that in American stadiums too much. Maybe the only times we would see it are when the Colts or Cardinals play with the roof open, because there's usually dome stadiums and wrap around like that. But so high winds there, but I'm not sure how much that affects the game. It's also worth noting that there were so many complaints about the grass in last year's Germany game that they brought in a new hybrid surface that's 90% natural grass, but they wove in some synthetic fibers. So hopefully we won't see the players slipping around as much this week in that Germany game.
Yeah, this just feels like a really tough spot for Mahomes too, because he averaged a season low 5.2 yards per pass play last week while playing through that illness. And it feels like an international trip is tough timing. It's pretty hard to get on a plane, fly all the way to Germany and try to recover.
Yeah. That's one of those things where we won't know. It's hard to handicap that. If it's 100% Mahomes this week, is it 80% Mahomes this week? All I know is if I had, flu symptoms, I certainly would not want to be flying on whatever it is, an 8 or 9 hour flight to Germany. And it certainly would slow down your recovery time.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our DraftKings player of the slate. Last week, you picked Derek Carr, who only cost $5,500 and threw for 310 yards and a pair of TDs. Who do you got lined up for us this week?
Well, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here, but A.J. Brown at 8,600 seems like a smash. So Brown is the first player in NFL history to have at least 125 receiving yards in 6 straight games. And sometimes we talk about how when the media catches on to trends like that, they usually are bound to stop. But this doesn't feel like one of those situations to me. I mean, the Cowboys have a 40% man coverage rate. That's second highest in the NFL. And Brown has a 48% target share versus man this season compared to a 28% target share against zone. So basically, anytime Jalen Hurts identifies that it's man coverage, he's just looking for Brown to moss the unfortunate quarterback on the outside. Brown is, he's 4th in EPA per target this year among wide receivers. So if the Cowboys do play a ton of man, I think Hurts is going to start peppering Brown, and I don't know. I mean, it feels like he's in line for another at least 125 receiving yards and probably a touchdown again this week.
Yeah, it's crazy how that guy's played since he yelled at Jalen on the sidelines early in the season. He's just popping off. But we've got our primetime preview next. And on Sunday night, we've got two of the AFC juggernauts going head to head. This game could have some serious playoff implications when we're looking back at it. And this is the Buffalo Bills versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bills are looking to avenge their playoff loss to the Bengals despite them being favored in that matchup. But both teams look pretty different on the defensive side of the ball. So how does this match up?
Yeah, so let's go back to that playoff game. You remember the Bills were 6-point favorites at home against Cincinnati. And that game wasn't necessarily a normal game because there was snow on the field. It was a little bit slippery for the Bills pass rush. And everyone thought that would be the Bills pass rush would be a huge advantage for them in that game because the Bengals were without both starting tackles. So let's go back to the week 17 game that got canceled because of the Damar Hamlin situation. And the Bills were actually still short favorites on the road in Cincinnati in that game. And in that game, it's worth noting that they didn't have starting safety Micah Hyde or edge rusher Von Miller. So we know that the Bills defense has been depleted with injuries thus far this season. But remember, they were favored in Cincinnati last season, missing two of the top defenders. Now, I still think this Bills defense is worse because they're dealing with injuries to Matt Milano, defensive tackle Daquan Jones, and cornerback Tre'Davious White. Now, we talked earlier about how Rasul Douglas can mostly replace White's production. And I think that Douglas will be able to limit Jamar Chase out there. But Milano and Daquan Jones, is that almost equivalent to missing Micah Hyde and edge rusher Von Miller, which was who they were missing last year in week 17? I think it is about. So I'm surprised to see the Bills underdogs here. And maybe people are getting a little bit too excited about the Bengals after their huge win in San Francisco last week.
Yeah, and speaking of defense, the Bengals defense looks a lot different compared to how it did last year as well, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing to note is that the Bills were favored last year in Cincinnati when the Bengals had both Jesse Bates and Von Bell. Now they lose both starting safeties this offseason. We've talked about how that would be a problem for them all year. And here they are, 28th in EPA per target allowed to tight ends. So they're certainly going to struggle this week against rookie tight end Dalton Kincaid, who leads the NFL with a 71% success rate. So, I mean, that's another thing to note is that, sure, the Bills defense is probably a little bit worse than they were last year in that week 17 game. That's, pretty comparable to what we're seeing here. But the Bengals defense is definitely worse. They're without both of their starting safeties from that game. And then the Bengals have, a 40% pressure rate up front. They've still been good up front this year. That's sixth in the NFL. But I think that mostly gets negated this week. We saw last Thursday night, Josh Allen, 2.2 second average time to throw. That was the fastest of his career. He's getting the ball out super quick. They were running that hurry up offense, and Allen had a career low 13% pressure rate as well. So I think he can negate the Bengals up front and exploit the Bengals weaker safeties than they had in those two games that they played in last year. Or I guess one and a half games they played last year.
Yeah, how are the matchups looking in the trenches? And it feels like this is where the game might be decided.
Well, I like Bills left tackle Deion Dawkins to limit Trey Hendrickson, who's definitely the Bengals' best defender. Hendrickson ranks 10th in pressures this year, but Dawkins ranks 7th in pass blocking efficiency. So I like Dawkins to contain Hendrickson off the edge. And then left tackle Connor McGovern has only conceded 9 pressures this year, so he should be able to do a pretty good job against Cincinnati interior defender DJ Reader, who ranks 12th in pass rushing efficiency. So if Allen gets the ball out quickly again, and the Bengals' 2 best pass rushers are lining up against the Bills' 2 best offensive linemen, I'm not too worried about the Bengals' pass rush this week.
Yeah, Josh is pretty deadly even when the pocket collapses, right?
Yeah, I mean, Josh is 4th. He's 4th in EPA per dropback outside the pocket this season, so he can certainly kill the Bengals on scramble drills on the rare occasion that they do get pressure. And I think the Bills will also slow down Cincinnati's pass rush with the ground game. The Bills are actually leading the NFL with a 47% rush success rate this year. That was a big emphasis for them in the offseason. And the Bengals rush defense ranks 31st according to our numbers.
Yeah, what about Joe Mixon and the Bengals rushing attack? How have they been?
The Bengals are averaging only 3.7 yards per rush. That's 9th worst in the league. And I just don't think they're going to be good enough to run Buffalo's defense out of light boxes, which we've seen them using a lot more last game. So if you remember back all the way this summer in the AFC East, podcast, I talked about after they didn't re-sign Tremaine Edmunds and Chicago got him this offseason, and they did bring in Taylor Rapp as a third safety. I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe the Bills are signaling to us that they're going to play a lot more dime personnel with three safeties on the field in Rapp, Jordan Poyer, and Micah Hyde. Now, that didn't happen to open the season. We actually saw Milano play alongside Dodson or Bernard mostly, and they stuck a nickel, which the Bills love to play nickel. But now that Milano is out, we're seeing Rapp come onto the field more. So the Bills only had a 5% dime rate in the first 7 weeks, but last week, Taylor Rapp replaced the linebacker on 37% of snaps. And Buffalo's defense, with Rapp on the field, I think is a lot more dangerous just because the two linebackers with Milano out have been pretty atrocious. So it can't get much worse there. And at least Rapp is better in coverage. And he's relatively, for a safety, he's pretty stout in run defense as well. So this is something that we thought the Bills would do to open the season. It took them halfway through the season to start doing it, and a Matt Milano injury. And it could hurt them against teams like, I don't know, the Ravens, or, teams that can really run them out of dime. You can't play dime against the Ravens, but you probably can play dime against the Bengals. So this week, I think we'll see even more Taylor Rapp on the field.
All right, we've seen Joey B's turning it up the last few weeks. Do you expect him to keep up the success?
Well, he definitely looks fully recovered from that calf injury. His deep ball is vastly improved. He's completed 61% of his passes with at least 10 air yards since week 5, compared to just a 29% completion percentage on the same throws in the first 4 games. However, I'm not sure Burrow's going to have clean pockets to throw downfield on Sunday night because Buffalo interior defender Ed Oliver ranks 7th in pass rushing efficiency, and he'll line up directly across from the Bengals' worst offensive lineman, left guard Cordell Volson, who has surrendered 19 pressures. That's 9th most among all NFL guards. So we look at this. Our model favors the Bills by 1.4 with the predicted total of 50.9. I think the Bills should be favored here, if not a pick'em. I think pick'em is the worst. We saw the Bills favored last year, and that was before the Bengals lost both their starting safeties. And then obviously the Bills are without Milano here, but those mostly, cancels out to me. I'm surprised we're seeing the Bengals take so much action. And we released the Bills in a teaser on Thursday morning to clients.
All right. Well, what are you going to go with for your primetime prop on Sunday night?
Dalton Kincaid over 37.5 receiving yards. We've been talking about these Bengals safeties, how much they've been struggling without Jesse Bates and Von Bell this year. They're allowing 0.33 EPA per target to tight ends, 28th in the NFL. And Dalton Kincaid has been really good for the Bills, particularly since the Dawson Knox injury, when he's kind of splitting time at tight end there to start the season. But he has 13 targets the last 2 games since Knox got injured, and he's had 65 receiving yards and 75 receiving yards against the Patriots and Buccaneers. So I think he kind of gets peppered. The Bills know that's a good matchup for them in this game, and the props all the way down at 37.5. So I think we can see Kincaid get to 50 receiving yards on Sunday night.
I like it. Well, this is a game that it feels like a must watch. We've got some good football coming this weekend, but I think that will do it for the podcast this week. As a reminder, college basketball is knocking on the doorstep. It is almost here. So make sure to head over to the website if you are interested. We've got second half of the season packages for NFL and college football. You can get all of the free analysis at drbobsports.com. And we will be back next Friday. As always, make sure to like and subscribe.